to the first of the NewSpace 2013 lunches. I hope that you've already enjoyed our programming so far. My name is Sarah Meschberger, and I am currently the Assistant Conference Chair. And next year, I will have the pleasure of serving as Conference Chair. Also, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to meet with me so that we can make NewSpace 2014 even better. It is my pleasure to introduce COO and Vice President of Business Development at XCOR, Andrew Nelson. After 15 years in aerospace and 9 years on Wall Street, he joined XCOR, where he has made many contributions, including the space vehicle wet lease. I would like to personally thank Andrew for coming to speak on the exciting progress of XCOR. Ladies and gentlemen, longtime friend of the foundation, XCOR Aerospace, Andrew Nelson.
So I've got about 25 minutes, and then I'll try to leave about 5 minutes for questions and answers. Of course, that means that I've produced about 50 slides, so we'll skip a few along the way. Thank you very much for having me here. It's great to be at NewSpace. I think my very first space conference I came to was a NewSpace, and it was a great time for me. I learned a lot, so it's great to see many of you here that I met my very first one back in 08 or whatever it was. It's also great to see many friends and colleagues here. Dr. Neal, FAA, AST, thank you very much. You're a great leader for our industry and appreciate you being here with us. So, well, let's just move right along. Our industry has a great opportunity. It has a great opportunity to create the next trillion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar industry that the world will experience. There are several that exist, but in particular, I think this one might be just as impactful as some of those that we've come to know and love and generally are in our pockets today. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about what is a trillion-dollar marketplace. And some of you have seen this on YouTube. I've sort of tried to improve or modify the presentation a bit. We're going to talk a little bit about the visionaries who are making this happen in the industry. And then I'll give you a little bit about how we can transform where we are today and where we're going in the future. And then I'll give you a little bit about XCOR. So folks ask, what's the status of the Lynx vehicle development? So I'll give you a couple minutes on that again. So what is a trillion-dollar marketplace? Well, what's a trillion? A trillion by definition is a 1 with 12 zeros behind it. Pretty big number. But what does it really mean? Who thinks the global electricity generation market is a trillion-dollar industry? Feel free to raise your hand. Certainly I did when I first saw this. But in fact, according to BCC market research, it's about a $300 billion a year industry. Okay? Let's keep moving on. Now, some of the electricity generation market is going to evolve. And I just pulled this slide out because this is a report done by Google called Clean Energy 2030. They talk about how our energy demands in the future are going to be driving a significant amount of infrastructure investment. And the one in particular I saw that struck me as interesting was enabling wind energy to be taken out of the mid-continent part of the U.S. and put into the grids. It was going to take about $130 billion of investment in infrastructure to make that happen. So I thought that was interesting. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So then I said, well, gee, okay, we got global energy. What about global airline revenue? I spend a lot of time on airplanes. A lot of time. I figure, yeah, I'm worth a few shekels here and there for the airline industry. So is that a billion-dollar industry? I'm sorry, a trillion. Thank you. Billion here, billion there. Pretty soon we're talking over. Trillion. Okay, you guys are smart. You're a smart, you're a smart crowd. It's getting there. In 2009, after down year is 500 billion. This year it's going to be about 670 billion in revenue for the top 150 airlines. So then I said global e-commerce, retail sales, not business to business, retail sales. That's got to be a $1 trillion industry. Raise your hand if you think it is. Give that man a Cupid dog. Only one in the room that was brave enough. Turns out, Goldman Sachs tells us this year it's going to be about $1 trillion. And you always believe what Goldman Sachs tells you.
One more.
So, how do you create big markets and structure? Well, first off, you have to fundamentally change how something is done that impacts everyone. And I mean everyone. So if we think of a market as sort of an inverted pyramid, and we'll give some props to our friend Brett from Blue Origin, who drew this out before he was a Blue Origin, and has since been adopted by everyone, I think. But if you think about an industry that is got types of enterprises and typical numbers and investment required, and you start with infrastructure. Okay, so in the communications world, that'd be the fiber optics that are all around, or the cell phone towers, or the ISS, etc. And then you have platforms that overlay that infrastructure. That could be your iPhone, or it could be the centrifuge that they just put on the ISS, or the exercise bike, or whatever it happens to be. You have platforms on top of the infrastructure, and you have applications on top of the platforms. So then you say, well, what does that industry typically look like? So at the infrastructure level, say in the US or around the world, you might see 3 to 10 to maybe even 100 players in the infrastructure marketplaces. Sometimes the infrastructure marketplace is a natural monopoly. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it has to be forced into a competitive marketplace, or you have to regulate on a competitive basis to make sure that the monopoly is not produced. Because typically these investments are in the billions. And that's where this number I mentioned from the Google number came in that struck me. Infrastructure. Get energy out of the mid-continent gap from wind. So then you talk about platforms. Typically, there might be tens, there might be thousands, maybe tens of thousands of platforms in an industry. And typically those investments might be tens of millions to even $1 billion of investment to get them up and operational. And then you have applications. It could be millions, tens of millions. I mean, how many apps are on the iPhone store now? I mean, there's a gazillion of them. Some of them cost $0 to produce, 50 million, 100 million, the numbers are there. But that's how you create a big old market. So you need to solve a fundamental need in a very unique way that's valued by others. Typically, you need a very enlightened regulatory framework to do something like this. In our case, it's the Commercial Space Launch Amendments Act of 2004 that Dr. Neal's office administers for us. Does a very good job, too. Thank you. So, and you really need visionary leadership. So let's talk about visionaries. So what is a visionary? There's an adjective, having or marked by foresight and imagination, or one who can envision the future. So one of the ones that I really like to hark back to in terms of aviation are the Wright brothers, Howard Flight. True visionaries. Bicycle mechanics in Dayton, Ohio, who produced the core set of technologies that we use today. Wind tunnels, wings, engines, etc., propellers. And they flew the first 100 or so feet in 1903. And today, we're now flying around the world. The China Clippers was the next big step. One that was really romantic for me when I was up and coming and learning and reading fantastic fiction and literature. Imagine in the late 20s, early 30s, one trip sees this idea of a flying boat, and you can go around the world in it and creates an airline around it. Shortly thereafter, the DC-3 became the first real practical, cost-effective airline platform. Incredible DC-3. You go up over the Rockies, fly long distances, very expensively, and carry a good load of passengers. And then the 747 became a great and very large game changer that today is now modeled around the world, and we see it in the A380, 787, and various others. There were similar steps being taken in the early days of space as there were in the aviation industry. Steps to reusable space started with the Bell X-1. Reusable rocket plane. Dropped from a bomber, carrier plane, and flew up, and Chuck Yeager, Bless his heart, broke the sound barrier and showed us that it was possible. The X-15 was about the third or fourth one in the line, and really took it to the next step. It became truly a suborbital research aircraft. Very much the lessons learned at the X-15 are being implemented at XCOR today. The next step was going to be the X-20, the dinosaur. But unfortunately, it was a step that was interrupted, which I feel was too bad, because it would have been the next step to fully reusable orbital systems. And of course, Apollo intervened, but then NASA attempted to go back to the space shuttle. And of course, we know that was a bit of an unrealized promise of monthly flights or weekly flights. The $50 million bogey that they initially started out on never was really realized. Toward the end, as we know, it was $1 billion flight or more. But today there are new space visionaries that we all are looking up to, doing things in a different way. Bob Bigelow, incredible foresight and vision. Saw something that NASA was going to discard, or had discarded. That could make an incredibly interesting business opportunity. Timeshares in space. Instant manned space flight, or instant manned space station. And he's out there doing what he's doing. He's now, of course, got the recent contract that he's going to be bolting one of his inflatable HABs onto the ISS. Bert and Richard. Thank goodness for Bert, thank goodness for Richard. Because Bert had vision, Paul Allen threw some money into it, Richard saw the opportunity and stepped in. And it made it acceptable for all of us dreamers to do the same thing that we've been doing already. Can't say enough about that. Elon Musk. We all know Elon's contributions. And he's going to continue to do it. And God bless his soul, I hope he can retire on Mars one day. Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin. Another great visionary. Been at it quietly, but been at it, spending his own money, learning new things, exploring the boundaries, and doing a great job. Paul Allen stepped back into the fray recently with Stratolaunch. Very exciting. One of my favorites, Jeff Grayson, of course. Jeff's been in it the whole way. So if you look at this sort of set of people, one of them sticks out. Jeff's the only, well, I guess Bert's not a billionaire, but all the rest are, or close to it. But it's exciting, the fact that in this industry, at this early stage, much as in the early computer industry days, you can still do something extremely impactful in your garage and move forward. All of you can be visionaries and leaders. Now there's some others that are going at it as well. And they're stepping in, they're sort of like the second wave, I'd call it. Planetary resources. When you have a group of people like this that are involved or backing and putting their own money into a venture, you know that you're starting to get to something that's pretty important. Eric Schmidt, Charles Simeone, Ross Perot Jr., Larry Page, and James Cameron. I'd love to give me an add up of that network there. Inspiration Mars, Dennis Tito. Very exciting activities going on. And I'm looking forward to seeing the results of that. And there are others that have been proposed, perhaps aren't as well funded, but still, great ideas with great people. Some of my personal favorites, of course, are the XCOR team that I'm a very privileged person to be a part of. I'm very excited every day when I go to Mojave and work with them. Space Expedition Curaçao, now Space Expedition Corporation, stepped in and wanted to be the first space line. Wanted to compete head-to-head with Virgin Galactic and truly be, a space line, as United is an airline versus us being XCOR and potentially a Boeing. Alan Stern, can't say enough about Alan's big energy, vision, and passion, pushing the bounds of experimentation, as well as big ideas like Golden Spike. Jason Andrews, I tell you, Jason is an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. He sees an opportunity, figures out how to prosecute against it, figures out how to do it, keeps his costs low, produces, generates a profit, and moves forward. Planetary Science Institute and the Citadel are doing interesting things with trying to find the origins of our early solar system and and some of the artifacts that potentially are left. And Jeff Mamber at NanoRacks, again, another one of my favorites. Jeff's got the racks up on ISS. It's funny, he had them up there before anyone knew. It's incredible. Love it. They see an opportunity to go after it. But how are we really going to get there to create this $1 trillion bottleneck, or this $1 trillion marketplace, and solve the launch bottleneck, which is holding up really this industry? I think the first step is the suborbital reusables. Demonstrate it, low cost, safer operations. Move on to perhaps orbitally inserting satellites from some of these reusables, suborbital vehicles, or the White Knight 2, for example. There's the orbital reusable unmanned launch system. Certainly some of the things that Blue Origin are working on are very interesting for that. Some of the Grasshopper activities at SpaceX. And then moving up to fully reusable manned launches as well. Now this is just representative, but as you lower the cost per kilogram to orbit, I believe you're going to increase the number of operations. It's only natural. Classic curve. But what is going on now? How do I know that this is really going to happen? Is it emerging? And absolutely it is. So let's talk about some of the things that are going on today. You've got unmanned and manned things that are going on, and some of them are funded, some of them are partially funded, and some are quite underfunded. So let's start at zero G. Today you can go take a zero G aircraft flight, and they will probably put about $20 million to get that operation started. SpaceX has probably spent about $1 billion to get the full operational capability, although there was $500 million to get the sort of a first successful launch of the Falcon 9. XCOR will probably do about $50 million on a reusable system before we're up and operational. Virgin Galactic will probably do about $500 million. SpaceX for their reusable capsule system, another $500 million. Moon Express is trying to go to the moon with a one-off for about $50. Planetary Resources, $2.5 to $3 billion in the 2018 timeframe. Inspiration Mars is largely funded, I think. And of course, they're going all the way to Mars. Mars 1 has got a 2-phase program in Golden Spike. There's a lot going on. A lot going on. But how do you really transform space? Originally, we saw space in very different terms. The first one was probably in the 40s. Exciting. It's probably some moon of Saturn or something like that, where you see a whole city down here, you know, and people frolicking. I guess they must be underneath the dome of something. In the 1950s, it got more real with sort of things like the Von Braun wheel and the space plane and orbital depots. Things that are very doable. And then, of course, the iconic image of the Pan Am Clipper, which really was something that fascinated me as a young boy. But the reality of space in 2013 is quite different. Of course, you had Mercury and Gemini, great successes, Apollo, Skylab, the shuttle, and of course the ISS. Now, the new reality is that suborbital is this enabler. Of course, you got Armadillo, you got the Blue Origin vehicle, Virgin, and Scale, and us. But the future steps to orbit, perhaps, are going to look different. These are a lot of different concepts that have been proposed over the years. This is one that's actually starting to be flown and tested. But full reusability is clearly the way forward. And these future markets can take on very different shapes. But if you just sort of talk about this to some of the people who are investing in these projects, you see sort of 4 or 5 what I call big rocks emerging as sort of the anchor tenants of this $1 trillion marketplace. Asteroid mining is one of them that the planetary resources people think is a multi-trillion-dollar market in its own right. You know, governments are going to continue to launch things, and if we're doing it better and cheaper, they're going to take advantage of that. And it's not going to become just a US and Russia and China thing, or parts of Europe. It's going to be a lot of people who are going to be wanting to launch stuff and operate stuff. The communications market today, space telecoms today, is about a $150 to $200 billion market, depending on what source you look at. If you think about a 7% compounded annual growth rate over 10 years, that's about a doubling of the market. It turns out, the last 10, 15 years, space comms is actually on a compounded annual growth rate of about 9 to 10%. That's doubling every 7 years. So reaching, you know, $500 billion in the next 10, 15, 20 years is eminently doable. Certainly not fiction. And And then space power, I think, is really an interesting replacement and growth market opportunity. Space-based solar power. A lot of people are thinking about it. Some people are starting to work on it. It's just inevitable. When you have low-cost transport in space, it's going to happen. Now, this doesn't even talk about all those products and applications and that sort of thing that are laying over top of this. So do your discounted cash flows, have it, do whatever you want, but still, you come up with trillions of dollars. Some of those, of course, are the space-based solar power, the platinum asteroid. What else? Orbital manufacturing and presence. We've talked about some of this, and I'll mention one particular application in one of the other slides. Communications applications. We've got CubeSats, like Planet Labs, just funded recently. Wants to launch 28 CubeSats in the next year or so, and operate a very profitable business off of it. They got Skybox just around the corner here. Again, another VC-funded activity. And GOI, up, operational, public, with a strong board, again, funded and working. U.S. government markets. I think eventually you're going to have a significantly lower cost reusable booster system that the government and the military will take advantage of based on proven technologies. And there are specific designs where they want to go point to point very fast, whether it be inserting equipment or people. I think eventually that's going to happen. But then there's this whole other layer. Picks and shovels, people call them, are applications. And there are many things where you can make a business in this industry. Pressure suits, orbital outfitters, David Clark, got orbital outfitters right here, Jeff. Payload processing. We have many people who want to have a 10 to 50, $100 million a year business doing payload processing for suborbitals and orbitals. Jason Andrews is already in it with Spaceflight Services. Robots on the moon. Interesting business plan competition at MIT that I got to judge a little while ago. And one of the ideas was to put a bunch of small robotic rovers on the moon. You can control them from your living room. And quite honestly, I think there's a ton of people who would love to do that. I know I would. Raise your hand if you'd want to control a robotic layer on the moon. Hell, you see, instant market. Where's Germanton when you need it? So, the Cisco Space Router, a real system. They actually put the test model up, and there's a potential that they can have a much more efficient set of router systems in the sky. Whether it happens one day, I don't know, but there's all sorts of great ideas. And then zero gravity solutions. Now a public company. Where's Richard Godwin? Is he in the room? Richard? Oh, did you just walk out? He just walked out. Just walked out. Okay. Doing interesting things. They've taken 6 missions to the ISS and proved that there are certain things that can be done if you grow organisms in space and then bring them back and plant them in the ground. Very exciting things. Could solve reusable jet fuel problems, for example. But again, these ideas are coming to the forefront now. But there are challenges to this future reality. We must confront them. One of the biggest challenges that we need to keep an eye on, I think, is the space launch system. The space launch system is a very interesting project. Managed properly, it can be a great thing for the country. Managed not so properly, it could really be a problem for NASA in the future, and we need NASA in the future as a big anchor customer doing their mission that they do best, which is exploration and science. NASA should not be in the trucking business. That's our job. Congressional interference happens all the time. Okay? Sometimes congressional interference is good, sometimes it's not. I'll cite this asteroid capture mission recently. You know, $100 million mission. That's like a rounding error. And they want to specifically exit out. I think it's ridiculous. And ITAR reform. I think we're on the right path here. Just recently, by the way, thank you very much for all of you who responded to the notice of proposed rulemaking on moving human spaceflight vehicles off the munitions list and on the commerce control list. Touch wood. I'm hoping that's a great success. But we really need ITAR reform to really make this market grow fast the way it needs to grow. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about links and where we're at. So what is the definition of lynx? Of course, it's a wild cat with yellowish furry brown fur, a short tail, tufted ears, and found chiefly in North America and Eurasia. But to me, of course, It's a hot smoking hot space plane from XCOR Aerospace. So, I think that this is one of the first steps to the future. If we can get this right, it'll build and allow us to do a fully reusable space plane system, which can do what we really want, which is lower the cost of orbital access by 2 or 3 orders of magnitude. Increase the accessibility of space from when you order to when you can get your launch from 3 years or 2 years to a day. And to do it 3 or 4 times, order of magnitude more safely. Now, the Lynx is coming together now in Mojave. This is a cutout view of some of the structures. I'll give you a quick update. So the cockpit has been one of our thorns on our side. We designed a cockpit that was very complex, and it's a challenge to build. But we're now hopefully going to see that delivered in the next 4 to 5 weeks. Touch wood. All this is caveated, by the way. Okay? So, members of the press, raise your hand. Okay. Do me a favor, don't say, I said we're going to fly this day. We may not. We're doing our best. We're humans. I'm going to try to be as open and give you as much information as I can. The fuselage and liquid oxygen tank in place. That's my timer. It says I've got 5 minutes left. In place and pretty much ready to go. Wing strakes, I saw them myself the other day. Got to touch them. Being delivered in the next week, the one, and then about 4 weeks later, the other one. Wings are largely finished in their detailed design. They should go into manufacturing shortly. The wings, once you design them, should be pretty easy to manufacture. I'll believe it when I see it. But touch wood, those will be in October timeframe. We just bolt them on. But the idea is that by the end of this year, we should have something in Mojave that looks like a real darn space plane that we can light the engines and roll down the runway on. And that's going to be an exciting day for us, and I know it's going to be an exciting day for you as well. If I can invite you all to that first taxi test, I would, but I can't. But hopefully, we'll have a public day sometime in the future and do just that for anyone who wants to come. Fingers crossed. I'm sure Stu Witt is going, what the hell did you just say? Where am I going to put all these people? We'll figure that out. But that's pretty much my talk that I had for today. And I have about 4 or 5 minutes for questions. So thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about the partnership that you have with Unilever?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much for asking. So, Unilever, potato, Unilever came to us through Space Expedition Corporation, our general sales agent. And for their Axe brand, they were developing a new brand called the Axe Apollo brand of men's cologne and shave, cologne and other products. And they wanted to do something very exceptional that had not been done. And they ended up buying, at first, 22 flights for a global promotion that had as a part of it a Super Bowl ad. And some of you have seen these ads. Raise your hand if you've seen the ads about the lifeguard and the fireman. They're really funny. They actually continue to move them on. There's one, a real funny one with a fella in a really cool Lambo who pulls up at an intersection in Beverly Hills, and sort of a moon buggy comes up, and he's by himself, and the moon buggy's sort of geeky, and the astronaut, there's like, 8 women in bikinis. It's sort of fun. So it was good. There's sort of a Hugh Hefner character as well. But what's exciting about this is the value proposition that they saw. They're spending about $130 million on product development and campaigns and ad buys and running it in 67 countries. In the first month and a half or 2 months of that promotion, 500,000 people around the world had signed up for it. It's a whole social media phenomenon as well. As I heard earlier, raise your hand if you've actually received an email asking someone to vote for the thing. I mean, I know I've got a few. So it's pretty amazing. They've since expanded the program. They bought a couple extra flights. And they're rolling it out in different countries around the world, 67 countries, I think. And in December, there's going to be about 115, 120 people down in Orlando going through a space camp and some training. And then they're going to down select to the final of 24 winners. That's not a unique promotion anymore. There will be more that will be announced. But very exciting. I think there's another sort of 60 or 70 flights in the next month or two that'll be announced potentially for different people. So very exciting stuff. So if you want to get a flight to space, go to axapollo.com and sign up. Next question. Almost got me. There you go. Yes, sir.
How does XCOR plan to take suborbital technology and extend it to orbital?
Okay, so we believe that the technologies that are embodied in the links can be evolved to do a fully reusable orbital system, put in a two-stage manner. Jeff Grayson spoke about this at Space Access a bit, but in effect, you would have a vehicle that would depart the runway that would be carrying another vehicle, and at some point in time would peel off the back, which is the shuttle did off the 747, only it would then continue to accelerate and eventually deposit another a group into space, whether it be payloads or 3 or 4 people. So the idea is that you have a fully reusable first stage and a fully reusable second stage. The concept is not as evolved in the sense of we've got a couple different options. We think that either option the design loop will actually close on those. The first stage, there's a couple different options, and they have different sets of combinations of propulsion technology, and we're evaluating these. Of course, the big question is thermal protection system on the orbital insertion vehicle. We need and we want something that can be flown at least once a day. So sort of the integrated vehicle structure, vehicle system TPS is one of the big things that we're thinking about. But as you guys all know, Jeff, and in Boston they say, they call him Wicked Smart. You know, he's figuring it out, and I think he's figured it out. We just have to now go prove he's figured it out. But first we're going to get links flying, and we're going to get some cash flow to the company, and then we'll start investing those dollars in Jeff's X-plane that he's got to go prove to everyone like myself and George and whatnot that he can actually do this. So. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, Mike Caldwell from Microwave Monolithics, Simi Valley, but I'm a little curious as I go through these discussions and coming to the conferences, they have very little about liability discussions and insurance. Could you touch on that?
Yes, sir. It'd be my pleasure. So we're very fortunate. We have a thing called the Commercial Space Launch Amendments Act of 2004. So there are various things you worry about when you're a guy like me when you fly a vehicle like these. The first is, what about the people inside the vehicle, the crew and the participant? Through the Commercial Space Launch Amendments Act of 2004, those people fly underneath an informed consent regime. And so in theory, they've indemnified us for losses of their personal being. States have also promulgated that down into state law in various states. The next thing you worry about is hitting something on the ground that is not yours, but belongs to somebody else, or somebody else. The FAA goes through a process at each location that you launch at and the specific vehicle that you fly and calculates the maximum probable loss for that vehicle in those various trajectories. We are required to insure up to that maximum probable loss, at which point the federal government assumes those losses up to some number that's inflation adjusted to something billion. Yeah, 2.5. Yeah, roughly 2-something billion. And then above that, it's us again. That's why we fly in places like Midland, Texas, Mojave, California, next coastlines. And then you have, I worry about things like hull loss. Originally, with this vehicle, I figured the first few launches we were going to have hull loss insurance from an insurance carrier, but as it turns out, I'm wrong. We have 4 or 5 offering it to us, and 1 or 2 of them are actually almost affordable. Otherwise, you'd self-insure. Now, the supply chain is also covered by those indemnifications and those legal structures here in the United States. Internationally, we are trying to promulgate those same frameworks into other people's legislation. I think there will be success in some of that. Some of those, for example, those indemnification frameworks are already in existence in other countries. Sometimes they're better than the U.S.'s, and in terms of the maximum probable loss sort of thing, insurance above a certain point. But we do have to worry about international operations, because they're not just going to take the FAA licensing and because they worry about things a little bit different. I could talk to you hours about certification versus licensing.
Very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, but the supply chain is covered, is the important thing, in most states and at the federal level. Did I get that right? Good. Okay, good. Okay. Other questions? One more? One more.
What ITAR issues do you run into?
So, the ITAR issues that XCOR is running into right now are more issues of fear versus actual issues. We haven't asked for an export license yet, although we've had extensive discussions with the State Department about it. We prosecute our business on a wet lease model, so in fact we don't really sell the vehicle. I think the big concern that people have is if you sell a rocket engine or a rocket plane, then it's going to get resold like an airplane and then resold and resold, and eventually one day it's going to end up in someone's hands that isn't very friendly and they're going to figure it out. We wet lease the vehicles, so in effect that at the end of their life we're going to take them back, okay, and take the propulsion system back. So it's a matter for us, I think, is can we get an export license? I think we can. I feel like we can. I'm not saying that we can, because then someone in the State Department would say I said something wrong. But the key, I think, is that with a good physical security perimeter around anything, you can export large things. I mean, we export stuff underneath that are munition-less items all the time. And there are DoD watchers that sit with them until they're launched, or otherwise have security perimeters around them and are used regularly. I mean, we sell X-15s, I mean, F-16s to people. You know, there are ways. So I think that we can solve the problem. Now, what would be much better is if all manned spacecraft were not on the munitions list, but were on the Commerce Control list. It would make it easier for us in terms of the paperwork and probably the cost of operating in a foreign country. But at the same time, those vehicles, before they're licensed by the FAA, still have to go through a very rigorous process that includes state and commerce and DoD review before we get even an FAA license. So I think that the controls are in place already that we could safely move the commerce control list. But if we don't, I still think that we have a great global market to pursue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for coming out to speak with us for lunch.